The Red Ball Express was far more than a convoy of trucks rolling across war-torn France. It was a meticulously engineered lifeline, a logistical innovation designed to sustain the pace of Patton's armored advance. At its core were the rugged 2.5-ton GMC CCKW trucks, affectionately nicknamed deuce-and-a-halves, capable of carrying approximately 2,500 gallons of gasoline in specially modified tanker variants. Convoys were standardized to maximize efficiency. One-way routes were strictly enforced to prevent bottlenecks, and convoys often stretched to 100 or 120 vehicles, moving in near constant motion along over 500 miles of improvised roads. Drivers rotated shifts tirelessly, many drawn from the segregated African-American 761st and 784th trucking battalions, whose discipline and endurance quickly became the stuff of legend. Maintenance units followed closely behind, ready to repair engines, patch tires, and replace damaged parts under the duress of near-continuous operations. For German reconnaissance, initial reports underestimated the scale and efficiency of this operation, assuming American supply lines would falter under attrition, traffic congestion, or poor road conditions. Every technical detail was calculated to ensure unbroken forward movement. The trucks, fully loaded, could reach speeds of up to 45 miles per hour, consuming roughly 6 miles per gallon of gasoline, a costly but necessary rate to keep pace with tanks and armored vehicles. Blackout lights and camouflaged markings minimized visibility to Luftwaffe reconnaissance, while central dispatchers at supply depots near Cherbourg and Le Havre continuously monitored fuel inventories and adjusted delivery priorities in real time. German officers, still reeling from the rapid American advance, found these systems almost incomprehensible. Even attempts at aerial interdiction failed to disrupt the flow, and sabotage along the routes proved largely ineffective. From the Axis perspective, it seemed as though every American vehicle knew precisely when and where to arrive, regardless of obstacles or enemy action, creating a mechanical rhythm that mocked their own faltering panzer columns. Yet the Red Ball Express was more than machinery and schedules. It was an exercise in human endurance and ingenuity. Drivers contended with the hazards of combat, including stray artillery fire, mined roads, and the ever-present threat of German ambushes. They navigated mud-choked lanes, shell-cratered highways, and the dense Normandy bocage under blackout conditions, all while keeping the convoys moving with remarkable consistency. Their perseverance underlined the broader genius of the operation, a system in which men, machines, and planning coalesced into a relentless logistical force. For the Germans, the sight of these convoys, advancing tirelessly across roads they had assumed would halt the Allies, was both infuriating and demoralizing. This framework of technical precision and disciplined execution would soon be put to the test in the first real battlefield trials, where the theoretical efficiency of the Red Ball Express collided with the unpredictable chaos of combat, revealing the true resilience and adaptability of America's supply backbone. By late August 1944, the Lorraine countryside was a theater of astonishing movement. Patton's Third Army, having pushed relentlessly from Mortain, now surged east toward Nancy and Metz, its advance entirely dependent on the lifeblood of the Red Ball Express. For the German Panzer Lehr Division stationed near Avricourt, the speed of the American advance was nothing short of bewildering. Reconnaissance patrols recorded M4 Shermans, M5 Stuarts, and M10 tank destroyers rolling across the fractured terrain with engines roaring, their operational endurance seemingly limitless. German officers struggled to reconcile the reports. Tanks and mechanized infantry appeared to arrive faster than intelligence predicted, as if the American armor were fueled by some inexhaustible source. One soldier later reflected in his diary, "They appear everywhere at once. How can they continue?" A sentiment echoed across multiple units, confronting the unrelenting push of Third Army forces. The scale of the Red Ball Express during these operations was staggering. On some routes, up to 3,000 trucks moved within a 24-hour cycle, threading cratered highways, crossing bombed-out bridges, and navigating narrow lanes that had halted earlier German armored thrusts. Each convoy carried thousands of gallons of gasoline, artillery shells, and rations, ensuring that tanks could maintain extended daylight drives without pause. Maintenance crews worked tirelessly along the roads, repairing vehicles on the fly, while drivers rotated shifts to keep the lines moving continuously. The German command, accustomed to the limitations of supply, watched helplessly as these convoys defied attrition, weather, and enemy interdiction, maintaining a momentum that directly translated into battlefield advantage. This logistical superiority had immediate tactical consequences. Patton's forces exploited gaps in German lines, seizing key road junctions and towns before the defenders could reorganize or mount effective counterattacks. The speed and volume of supply deliveries created a psychological effect nearly as powerful as the physical presence of American armor. German soldiers, confronted with relentless, refueled tanks and trucks, began to doubt their own assessments of Allied strength. Generals accustomed to the limitations of mechanized warfare faced a new reality, an opponent capable of sustaining unprecedented operational tempo. The Red Ball Express, through its combination of meticulous planning, disciplined execution, and sheer scale, had transformed the Third Army into a force of continuous motion, one that German intelligence struggled to fully comprehend. As the Lorraine campaign pressed on, the Allies' logistical ingenuity forced a re-evaluation of enemy expectations, setting the stage for a deeper examination of how German planners interpreted and reacted to this unstoppable flow of supplies. On August 13, 1944, the early morning mist hung low over the shattered fields outside St. Lo, Normandy, masking the churned earth and shattered hedgerows with a pale, ghostly haze. The faint scent of diesel and mud clung to the humid air, and a low, continuous rumble grew louder with each passing minute. From the perspective of German sentries perched in the remnants of crumbling farmhouses, it seemed as though an endless river of armored vehicles had risen from the fog itself. 4 Sherman tanks, painted in their muted olive drab, rolled forward with a mechanical inevitability that defied human comprehension. A German soldier later wrote of the moment, "The machines appeared to draw fuel from the very air, their engines never tiring, their tracks never slowing, a testament to what would soon be recognized as the Red Ball Express." Reports filtered back to German headquarters that morning, describing American armored columns advancing through the bocage in formations that seemed impervious to attrition. Infantry patrols encountered what they described as miraculous convoys of trucks and half-tracks, each carrying hundreds of gallons of high-octane gasoline and supplies, arriving just in time to keep the tanks moving. For the Germans, it was an unnerving contrast to their own panzer divisions, which were often immobilized by fuel shortages and logistical bottlenecks. Lieutenant Colonel Heinrich von Schiller of the 352nd Infantry Division noted in his journal the strange psychological effect. "Our men cannot believe the Americans keep advancing. It is as though they draw strength from some source beyond reach." By midday, reconnaissance reports had catalogued hundreds of trucks threading narrow country roads under strict blackout conditions, their headlights masked, engines humming in a near-hypnotic rhythm that blended with distant artillery fire. The German officers, frustrated and bewildered, scrambled to trace the supply lines and understand the operational genius enabling Patton's forces to maintain relentless momentum across the fractured landscape. As the day stretched on, hedgerow ambushes, once effective in slowing enemy tanks, yielded only temporary delays. Patrols sent to intercept American columns returned shaken, describing formations of Sherman tanks that paused only briefly before moving on, each vehicle refueled and resupplied as if by some unseen hand. German soldiers whispered of a ghost army, an unstoppable force that appeared and disappeared across the patchwork fields of Normandy, its movements dictated by a discipline and planning they could scarcely comprehend. Intelligence reports emphasized the scale of the operation. Approximately 5,958 trucks, drawn from the 2nd and 6th Truck Battalions, were running continuous convoys, delivering over 12,000 tons of supplies during the first week of operations. The Americans had orchestrated a supply network of near-military precision, routing convoys around destroyed bridges and shell-cratered roads, often under the cover of night, while employing strict scheduling to ensure fuel reached the front lines without delay. By evening, as the sun dipped below the ragged horizon, the German command could only watch in disbelief. Reconnaissance planes and patrols reported fuel depots emptying and convoys still moving, a logistical ballet that seemed to mock the conventional wisdom of warfare. Every American Sherman that continued rolling north towards St. Lo undermined German defensive plans, eroding morale and fueling the myth of the Red Ball Express. For the Axis, this was more than a tactical problem. It was a psychological one, a symbol of Allied ingenuity and relentless drive. As the night descended, the distant rumble of engines became a constant heartbeat, echoing through the craters and hedgerows, signaling that the Americans were not merely advancing, they were unstoppable. This relentless efficiency, born of meticulous planning, mechanized coordination, and technical innovation, laid the foundation for the next phase of operations. Understanding how Patton's planners conceived and executed the Red Ball Express, a lifeline that would sustain the armored push across liberated France by mid-July 1944. The hedgerows and shell-scarred villages of Normandy bore the marks of relentless combat. Operation Overlord had secured the beaches at Utah and Omaha, but as American forces pushed inland, the landscape transformed into a corridor of both opportunity and logistical peril. General Patton's Third Army, newly activated and hungry for speed, began to churn through the French countryside, its armored columns consuming fuel at a staggering pace. Each M4 Sherman tank demanded roughly 60 to 75 gallons of gasoline per day in active operations, while accompanying half-tracks and trucks added hundreds more gallons to the tally. For the German defenders, now retreating toward the Seine, this presented a familiar expectation. Advancing Allied formations would inevitably grind to a halt without resupply, creating a vulnerable pause that could be exploited. Yet in late July, that pause never came. German reconnaissance repeatedly reported American armor pressing forward with a consistency that seemed almost supernatural, their momentum undiminished by distance or terrain. The answer lay in a logistical innovation born of necessity, the Red Ball Express. Conceived in July 1944, this dedicated trucking network was designed to keep Patton's spearhead fed, fueled and armed. Depots near Cherbourg, Le Havre, and other captured ports became the launching points for a relentless chain of convoys. Each truck loaded with high-octane gasoline, artillery shells and rations, bound for units advancing hundreds of miles from the coast. By late August, the operation was moving between 6,000 and 7,000 trucks daily, crisscrossing over 500 miles of makeshift routes, many of them damaged by earlier fighting or strewn with debris. German intelligence tracking the flow of these convoys could do little but report their astonishment. Air Patrol near Carentan noted truck after truck threading narrow roads that should have been impassable, arriving where we had calculated they could not reach for days. For Axis officers, the realization was chilling. No ambush, no mined road, and no destroyed bridge could halt this mechanical river of supplies. The psychological toll on German units was immediate and profound. Soldiers who had once believed the American advance would slow found themselves facing a foe whose operational endurance seemed limitless. Reports filtered back to German command of convoys moving with near-ritual precision, engines humming like a single organism under blackout conditions, carrying everything from ammunition to fresh rations for troops who had marched relentlessly behind armored columns. Panzer divisions, already struggling with fuel shortages and stretched supply lines, could only watch as Patton's tanks maintained a pace that defied conventional military logic. The Red Ball Express did not merely keep the Third Army moving, it created the illusion of invincibility, eroding German confidence even before direct engagement. Each truck that delivered fuel or food represented not just material but a psychological victory, a tangible demonstration of Allied planning and adaptability. Understanding this context is essential. The breakout from Normandy was not simply a story of tanks and infantry advancing across France, but a complex orchestration of supply, speed, and foresight. The dire need for continuous fuel, met by an innovative and unrelenting trucking operation, allowed Patton's forces to sustain an offensive that seemed immune to the normal vulnerabilities of war. The Germans, expecting to exploit logistical weaknesses, instead faced a near-miraculous flow of material, delivered day and night with precision that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. This groundwork sets the stage for a deeper exploration of how the Red Ball Express functioned in practice, from scheduling and routing to the human determination that powered each mile of convoy. The Red Ball Express was not only a triumph of logistics, it was a weapon of the mind. German infantrymen and panzer crews repeatedly confronted the unnerving reality that American armor could materialize seemingly anywhere, at any time, sustained by convoys that never faltered. Intelligence reports from the front frequently remarked on a sense of inevitability surrounding Patton's advances, a creeping recognition that no defensive calculation could fully account for the relentless movement of fuel, men, and machines. For Axis soldiers, this psychological pressure eroded confidence in both strategy and improvisation. Ambushes that might have delayed a few tanks now felt futile, and even experienced panzer crews questioned whether their positions could ever withstand a mechanized opponent operating at such tempo. For the Allied side, the constant stream of fuel and supplies fostered morale as profoundly as it sustained mobility. Truck drivers, once regarded as a peripheral element of operations, became central to the war effort, their shifts of endless miles transforming into a source of pride and camaraderie. The segregated 761st and 784th Trucking Battalions, often operating under fire and in extreme conditions, earned legendary reputations for discipline, endurance, and precision, turning a logistical necessity into a human testament to professionalism. The psychological impact rippled through combat units as well. Tanks and infantry, moving behind a dependable supply line, felt unstoppable, their confidence reinforced by the certainty that fuel, ammunition, and rations would be waiting at the next checkpoint. Axis commanders, by contrast, faced mounting frustration. Traditional delaying tactics, ambushes, and road interdictions proved largely ineffective against a network that combined planning, industrial scale, and human resilience. The interplay of fear, awe, and reluctant admiration amplified the operational effectiveness of the Red Ball Express, turning morale itself into a force multiplier. German troops saw the supply lines as both a tangible and symbolic threat, while Allied forces drew psychological strength from the very system that kept them moving forward. The Red Ball Express thus exemplified how logistics and human perception intersected on the battlefield, a dynamic that shaped both tactical engagements and strategic decisions. This understanding naturally leads into an analysis of how these intertwined factors influenced the broader outcomes of the campaign, from the speed of advances to the recalibration of German defensive priorities. The unbroken flow of fuel supplied by the Red Ball Express fundamentally reshaped the tactical map of late 1944. Patton's armored columns executed deep thrusts across northern France, moving at a tempo that German commanders could neither anticipate nor counter effectively. By exploiting gaps in defensive lines, US forces were able to outmaneuver slower, fuel-constrained Axis units, seizing key terrain and maintaining operational initiative. Counteroffensives planned under the assumption that American armor would eventually pause for lack of fuel repeatedly faltered, as tanks and mechanized infantry appeared where they were least expected, fully operational and ready for engagement. The consequences were immediate and measurable. Strategic cities such as Metz and Strasbourg fell under pressure more rapidly than anticipated, while German formations along the Siegfried Line found themselves forced into hasty withdrawals or defensive repositioning. Operational reports from the front underscore the impact of this sustained mobility. Even well-entrenched German positions were at risk of encirclement as Sherman tanks and accompanying vehicles traversed roads, fields, and forested lanes previously deemed impassable. The combination of speed, endurance, and continuous resupply challenged conventional defensive doctrines, compelling German commanders to rethink how reserves were deployed and how mobile defense could be maintained under relentless Allied pressure. The Red Ball Express, in effect, became a force multiplier not only through materiel delivery, but by shaping the operational choices of the enemy. Its success, however, was not absolute. The system demanded meticulous coordination, constant maintenance, and adaptability to the unpredictable conditions of a war-torn landscape. Recognizing both its revolutionary achievements and its inherent vulnerabilities sets the stage for an examination of the limits encountered by the Red Ball Express and how Allied logisticians responded to sustain this extraordinary effort. Despite its remarkable achievements, The Red Ball Express faced a host of operational challenges that tested the limits of both men and machines. Roads churned to mud by rain, and constant traffic frequently slowed convoys, while mechanical failures, from blown tires to engine breakdowns, threatened to halt the continuous flow of fuel. Even theft, sabotage, and occasional Luftwaffe attacks posed intermittent dangers, though the scale and efficiency of the system often rendered such efforts largely ineffective. Allied engineers responded with ingenuity, constructing temporary bridges over destroyed crossings, rerouting convoys around craters and obstacles, and enforcing strict discipline to keep trucks moving in orderly formations. Maintenance teams worked in relentless rotation, repairing damaged vehicles under pressure and ensuring minimal disruption to the schedule. Centralized communication networks allowed dispatchers to adjust routes in real time, rerouting trucks to bypass hazards and maintain a continuous supply chain. Truck drivers bore the brunt of these demands, enduring long hours over treacherous terrain, operating under blackout conditions, and facing the constant threat of enemy action. Crews were pushed to extreme fatigue. Innovations in shift rotation and rest schedules were implemented to sustain operational tempo, without sacrificing safety or efficiency. Occasionally, German forces identified weak points along the convoys, targeting choke points or lightly defended stretches of road. Yet the responsiveness and adaptability of the Red Ball Express ensured that such attacks had minimal impact. Supplies continued to flow, keeping tanks, artillery, and infantry fueled and ready for the next thrust. These operational adaptations underscore the human determination, technical skill, and logistical planning that made the Red Ball Express resilient under pressure. The system's ability to overcome obstacles while maintaining momentum not only shaped the outcome of the Normandy breakout and subsequent campaigns, but also laid the groundwork for the post-war study of military logistics, revealing lessons that would influence the planning of mechanized supply operations for generations to come. By September 1944, German military intelligence was grappling with a problem that defied conventional calculation. Abwehr reports describe officers watching in disbelief as columns of fully fueled Sherman tanks rolled ceaselessly across the Lorraine countryside, covering distances that, by known supply calculations, should have been impossible. Field dispatches from the 5th Panzer Army recorded similar astonishment. "They move as if the war materializes ahead of them," one officer noted, while others speculated that the Americans had secret fuel caches hidden along the roads, phantoms conjured by meticulous planning rather than actual stockpiles. The psychological impact on German troops was immediate. Soldiers, once confident that shortages would stall the American advance, now faced armored units seemingly impervious to logistical limits. Morale eroded as Allied forces maintained unbroken momentum, exploiting gaps in the front and seizing key positions before counterattacks could be organized. Technical miscalculations compounded Axis frustration. Estimates of Patton's fuel consumption were off by as much as 40 to 50%, leading commanders to plan defensive operations based on outdated assumptions. Efforts to interdict the convoys, through air raids, artillery strikes, or roadblocks, had limited effect, as trucks ran primarily at night and used flexible routing to bypass hazards. Intelligence officers also recorded the unusual composition of the trucking battalions, noting that many drivers were African-American soldiers from the segregated 761st and 784th units. Their discipline, endurance, and ability to operate continuously under combat conditions surprised German observers, who had expected the convoys to falter under fatigue or attrition. These reports painted a picture of an enemy not merely advancing, but orchestrating a logistical miracle on a scale that German planners struggled to grasp. The cumulative effect of these revelations was a mixture of anxiety, disbelief, and urgency. High Command convened meetings to reassess defensive strategies and redeploy operational reserves, recognizing that traditional methods of slowing or isolating Patton's forces were inadequate. The Americans' ability to combine industrial capacity, careful planning, and relentless execution had created a logistical juggernaut that was as much a psychological weapon as a material one. For the Germans, understanding the Red Ball Express required more than field reports. It demanded a reconsideration of the very assumptions underpinning mechanized warfare. As Axis forces scrambled to adapt, the focus shifts to the Allied industrial and logistical apparatus that sustained this extraordinary operation, revealing the planning, production, and human effort that kept the Red Ball Express moving day and night. The Red Ball Express was more than a feat of tactical planning. It was the manifestation of American industrial might turned directly into battlefield power. From June through September 1944, U.S. factories roared to life, producing tens of thousands of GMC CCKW deuce-and-a-half trucks and specialized fuel tankers. Detroit alone was churning out more than 45,000 trucks annually, each destined to traverse the fractured roads of liberated France. Fuel supply was a vast, carefully coordinated enterprise. Gasoline refined along the Gulf Coast flowed across the Atlantic to Cherbourg, Le Havre and other captured ports, then into storage depots fortified against Luftwaffe raids. Maintenance units accompanied convoys, stocked with spare engines, tires, axles, and other essential parts, prepared to replace damaged components on the spot and prevent delays that could stall an advancing armored column. Strategic planners devised intricate scheduling systems using mileposts, checkpoints, and strict one-way routings, ensuring trucks arrived at supply points in a continuous, unbroken chain. Convoys adapted to mud-choked lanes, bombed bridges, and shell-scarred highways with remarkable efficiency, maintaining the flow even under adverse weather conditions. From the German perspective, the operation was almost incomprehensible. Reconnaissance officers repeatedly noted the Americans' ability to convert raw production capacity into relentless forward momentum. Tanks and trucks moved day and night, engines humming like clockwork, sustained by a network so robust that attrition, sabotage, or natural obstacles could not halt it. Axis troops, observing the near-inexhaustible streams of fuel and material, increasingly recognized that conventional, defensive tactics were insufficient against an enemy who had fused industrial scale with tactical innovation. The C-dust scale and reliability of this logistical achievement created a foundation for battlefield success that went far beyond mere numbers. By ensuring that fuel and supplies reached the front lines without interruption, the Red Ball Express allowed Patton's armored units to operate at an intensity and speed that had no historical precedent. For German commanders, this industrial-backed mobility was both astonishing and demoralizing, a demonstration of how production lines in Detroit could dictate the tempo of combat in the fields of France. Establishing this industrial context sets the stage for the next phase, examining concrete battlefield examples where sustained fuel delivery enabled operational breakthroughs and forced the enemy to confront a new level of Allied. Maneuver Warfare 7A, September 1944 unfolded. The Red Ball Express demonstrated its decisive power beyond the Lorraine countryside, sustaining Patton's rapid push toward the German border. Around Metz and later near Nancy, M4 Sherman and M5 Stuart units routinely arrived before German defensive positions could be fully organized, their arrival reshaping the tactical landscape. Convoys moved with astonishing regularity, delivering more than 12,000 tons of fuel each week, a volume sufficient to keep tanks and mechanized infantry operating at a tempo previously thought impossible. These deliveries allowed Patton's forces to execute bold flanking maneuvers, envelopments, and deep penetrations into enemy-held territory, exploiting gaps that German commanders had assumed were secure. From the German perspective, the coordination between trucks and combat units was bewildering. Armored spearheads appeared consistently supported by a shadow army of logistics vehicles, their presence rendering conventional assumptions about supply and operational endurance obsolete. Reconnaissance reports repeatedly emphasized the unbroken streams of trucks moving through twilight and night, often under blackout conditions and strict radio silence to avoid detection by artillery observers or Luftwaffe fighters. German units, accustomed to interdicting supply lines to blunt enemy offensives, were forced to watch helplessly as Sherman tanks, fully fueled and supported, advanced far beyond the distances they had anticipated. Skirmish accounts describe panzer crews breaking off engagements upon observing freshly supplied American armor approaching with apparent ease, their confidence undermined by the unrelenting logistical tide. The psychological impact on Axis troops was profound. Soldiers and junior officers alike began to doubt that the Allies could ever be forced into pause by the conventional methods of attrition or supply disruption. The repeated proof of the Red Ball Express's effectiveness solidified its reputation as a force multiplier, transforming mere transportation into a tactical weapon. For American troops, the sight of fuel and supplies arriving day and night bolstered morale and confidence, reinforcing the sense of operational invincibility that Patton's army projected. For the Germans, the seemingly inexhaustible logistical support became a source of unease, shaping both defensive planning and battlefield expectations. These patterns of supply, movement, and psychological influence set the stage for a deeper examination of the broader mental impact of the Red Ball Express on both those operating it and those striving to stop it as the Allies closed in on the Reich. The legacy of the Red Ball Express extends far beyond the battlefields of Normandy and Lorraine. Post-war analysis recognized that the continuous, high-volume delivery of fuel and supplies was not merely a support function. It was a decisive enabler of operational tempo, allowing armored and mechanized units to maneuver with unprecedented speed. The principles honed during the Express informed NATO supply planning, mechanized army doctrine, and the design of dedicated logistics corridors in conflicts that followed, embedding lessons of centralized dispatch, embedded maintenance, and disciplined convoy operations into the foundation of modern military logistics. Efficiency, coordination, and adaptability, demonstrated on the roads of northern France, became benchmarks for sustaining combat operations under pressure. Even former German officers acknowledged the ingenuity of the system, noting that no comparable logistical network existed within the Wehrmacht during the war. The human element, too, left a lasting impression. Drivers and support personnel, particularly those from the segregated 761st and 784th Trucking Battalions, were later honored for their courage, endurance, and professionalism under extreme conditions. Their work ensured that Patton's Third Army could sustain relentless momentum, turning raw industrial output into tactical advantage. The Red Ball Express thus stands as a testament to the combined power of industrial might, technical innovation, and human determination in shaping battlefield outcomes. As one reflects on the incredulity of German observers, who once watched seemingly endless streams of fuel and armor advance across Normandy's shattered countryside, the story comes full circle, illustrating how ingenuity and perseverance transformed logistical necessity into a strategic weapon that altered the course of the war. Returning to the dust-choked highways of Normandy, it is possible to imagine the same German patrols decades later, recounting the surreal sight of Patton's armored columns advancing with what seemed like inexhaustible energy. The Red Ball Express was never merely a supply route. It was a bold manifestation of American ingenuity, industrial capacity, and relentless determination, transforming the mundane act of transportation into a strategic weapon. By ensuring that tanks, half-tracks, and artillery were fueled and supplied without pause, it enabled Patton's fast-moving forces to overrun expectations, seize territory at unprecedented speed, and shock an enemy that had anticipated delay. Axis soldiers, bewildered and demoralized, witnessed a phenomenon that redefined the possibilities of mechanized warfare, challenging conventional assumptions about operational limits and endurance. Day and night, tanks rumbled forward, sustained by a continuous stream of trucks driven by disciplined, courageous crews who navigated mud-choked roads, cratered highways, and enemy threats with unwavering precision. The psychological impact, fear, awe, and reluctant admiration, merged with the operational reality, creating a battlefield environment where human morale and logistical efficiency became inseparable from combat effectiveness. The story of the Red Ball Express stands as a testament to the intricate interplay between human effort, technology, and strategy, illustrating that victories often hinge as much on supply and organization as on firepower or tactical brilliance. In recalling the astonishment of German generals and soldiers alike, the Red Ball Express emerges not only as a logistical marvel, but as a symbol of the decisive, sometimes unseen, forces that shaped the course of war, a vivid echo of that first incredulous observation on the foggy roads outside St. Lo.